So, like Barry was saying, it's really hard to kind of just figure out where to start when it comes to safety. There's so many things possible to talk about. The last time I did this last year, my presentation went a little bit long. I don't know if anyone remembers that. It was like 45 minutes or so. And the reason being is because there's a lot of tangents about gear and a lot of general kind of safety things. But there's two kind of topics which you can talk about in terms of safety. There's the next skydive advice, and then there's this skydive advice. This skydive is where tangents come from, where you say, well, what if I'm 1,000 feet below the formation, and you come up with all these hypothetical scenarios, and really the idea behind Safety Day is, so how many people in here are skydiving right now? Nobody? Cool. All right, so we want next skydive advice to be able to kind of figure out how to plan the next skydive and prevent ourselves from getting into these these pathological situations you can come up with. So we'll try to focus on that and keep it semi-brief. So gear selection. For belly flying, people always say free fly friendly rigs, free fly friendly this or that or whatever. Safe rigs are safe rigs, whether you're belly flying or free flying. You don't want toggles coming out. You don't want flaps coming open. You don't want handles, sort of just bridle kind of making their way out throughout the skydive. We don't necessarily have we belly flyers don't necessarily have as fast air speeds to deal with, and we're not necessarily exposing our rig to varying winds, but we do actually touch each other once in a while on the skydive. So when we're taking docks, you do have people taking grips and stuff like that. You don't want to have a bridle or a toggle or something like that getting in people's hands. So when it comes to weight belts, you want to be able to secure the weight belt. Make sure you tuck away any kind of excess webbing that's associated with the clips on it, and rotate it forward so it sits comfortably and it allows you to still arch. You want it to be comfortable. You don't need it to be like a girdle, bringing it in your chest. But make sure it's not flapping around too loose, because something else that's right in the area are your reserve and cutaway handles. So you don't want to have a big thing full of lead, bouncing around and getting in the way and being very tempting to grab a hold of if you have a malfunction. Another thing with weight belts is that it makes you weigh more. So if you have a canopy that's the same size, you're going to have a higher wing loading. So don't forget that when you put a weight belt on for free fall, you have to land with it. We don't condone bombing the landing area with it. Like, holy cow, I'm going fast now. Forget that thing. Sorry. So you can keep that in mind. When you do put that weight belt on, you're wearing it all the way to the ground. So keep in mind you will be going faster. Full face helmets. It is recommended if you're doing four-way turn-in points, that kind of thing. Full face helmets can be helpful, primarily because you can get kicked in the face. If you're going fast, you're doing really good four-way. You're going to be close together. You will have one time where you turn around to the formation and you catch someone's foot to the face. And with a full face helmet, it makes that much less unpleasant.
True story.
Let's see. Handles. So jumpsuits. When people wear jumpsuits, a lot of times they like to be real matchy, all like hooked up with their gear and everything like that. I've seen people that have had their jumpsuits and their rigs all perfectly matching, and then they had, for example, all red grippers everywhere and red handles. Oh. So the only thing they had on them that was red were grippers and handles. And if you're jumping with someone and they're not paying attention, and they're turning around to take a grip and they got a handle that's, by the way, when you're belly flying and you have soft handles, they flop out like that, so they look kind of like grippers. So keep that in mind. If you have if you have red handles, whatever, maybe reconsider getting all red grippers on your jumpsuit.
Guilty.
Let's see.
I look like an ass.
Size of formation, something that came up during free flying. Know your limitations. Don't necessarily. Everybody has. Everyone comes around to their 100 jump. Everyone they've ever known has got to be on their 100 skydive. So they do. How many people we got? 12. Let's do a 12 way. And when you don't necessarily have the skills, a lot of things that can be little problems like being able to dock in a formation, and just being able to identify where everybody else is on the skydive, that becomes a lot harder when just the more people you add to it. So until you feel comfortable, like nailing it on a 4-way or a 2-way or anything like that, don't add more people. Adding more people doesn't add more success, right? It actually usually subtracts from it. So keep that in mind when you're planning your skydive. Know your limitations, and just because it's belly flying doesn't mean you can just add it, the whole plane and expect it to work out well. Let's see. And in terms of size, make sure you choose break-off altitudes that are appropriate for the size skydive. I believe the sim, and someone's going to correct me if I'm wrong, says 1,500 feet above where the highest person is pulling is where you should be breaking off for like small to medium-sized skydives. Anything bigger than that, of course, you want to add altitude to make it safer. Climb out and door considerations. So as a belly group, at this drop zone, you'll be coming out first, barring tracking dives. But you'll probably be one of the first groups out if you're doing a bunch of belly groups. So keep in mind that means it will be your responsibility to spot when you open the door. We have good pilots here. They're very good at giving us good spots. But as Barry said before, don't open the door and just get out of the plane right away without looking down where you're getting out. And in terms of, this is one of those tangents that went off before, but if you have any questions about spotting, find an instructor and ask your questions there about what kinds of things you should be looking for. So when setting up in the door, let's see, if the formation allows for it. So a lot of times in belly flying, you'll be launching a lot of very kind of interesting formations. You want to set the skydive or the formation up as far forward in the plane, in the door, as you can, because you'll sometimes have people standing, launching this formation from pretty far inside the plane, and as soon as you say go and someone starts exposing themselves to the air, that formation is immediately going to start moving toward the back of the airplane. And if you set this thing up where the tail flyer or the inside center is basically all the way up against the inside of the plane, if you're in a belly formation and you're leaning against the back bulkhead of the door and you're holding out of the formation, you're in for a world of hurt as soon as they say go. You want to be able to move as far up forward as possible, and keep in mind that you want to be exiting kind of through the front half of the door as much as possible. As soon as it leaves, it's going to start going backwards, and you want to give yourself the best chance to not hit the side of the door. It hurts. Let's see. That also goes for diving out of the plane. If you're diving after a slightly larger formation, don't watch the formation and go chasing after it. It's amazing how you can look past the door frame and see the formation you're going after, and you go right out of the plane and nail your shoulder on the door or your leg or something like that. You want to make sure that you exit the plane safely when leaving after a formation. Okay. So, getting to the formation. Again, this is getting the formation and docking. So this is something where, again, the next skydive versus this skydive. First, for the next skydive you go on, keep in mind you want to conserve your altitude. I know it's really exciting to get to beat the guy that dove out behind you to the formation. You got there first, and you can taunt him on the ground, but you want to make sure that until you get to the point where you can do that reliably and you can stop before you get to the formation, take it easy. If you get there, I guarantee you, when you get down to the ground, if you got there 5 seconds before breakoff and you docked and it took you the whole time to get there, it's going to be a lot better than if you get down to the ground and you had never made it in because you went bombing by it, at 7,000 feet and never got back up to it, and people never knew where you went after that.
Or you take out the formation.
Or you slam into the formation without stopping at all. So don't do that either. So yeah, take your time. People don't just immediately have this natural ability to just stop, hit the brakes, and just coast perfectly into the formation.
Unless
you stop a little bit early, then you can kind of work your way down there if you need to. But take your time. Be conservative. So next thing, if you start going low, stop it. That's kind of the biggest thing. You can go. We'll get to that in a second. So, one of the biggest problems with going low is when people go a little bit low, and then in the process of realizing they went a little bit low, they go a lot low. Where you'll see they'll be conservative. They'll approach the formation. They'll get right to it, and then they'll start to go past it, and then they go, "Oh no!" and they're looking up at it, and it takes them not only a few seconds, but 200 or 300 feet to really stop themselves from going low. So as soon as you start realizing you're going low, stop it. And by that, basically, essentially, increase your surface area.
Stop looking in front.
If you don't know how to do that, if you don't know how to stop descending and come back up in a straight line, I highly recommend the tunnel. It's a really, really good training tool for going up and down in a vertical area, and to be able to control your fall rate really, really well. So again, you can make a situation a lot worse by not reacting to it and saying, "Oh no, I'm low," and you're like, "Oh, it's getting worse." So yes, so if you start going low, stop it. Docking. Take your time with docking as well. I've seen people approach formations. They do a really, really great job, all the way up until the point where they're like about 1.5 feet above the formation, and they take their grip like that. And the first thing that happens when you do this is you start going forward over the top of the formation, and you just start clobbering people. Another thing is if you're just a little bit too low on it, and again you reach up and you start looking up like this to grab the formation, and you just continue sinking below it. So beyond level, fly to your spot where you don't need to take the grip, then take the grip. Don't ever need to take the grip to prevent yourself from going somewhere you don't want to be. Let's see. For this, so I'm going to go back on my promise a little bit. For this dive, so if you do find yourself a little bit low, try to keep the formation in your sight as much as possible. You want the goal really, in terms of maintaining safety, if you go low or if you get out of position where you're somewhere you don't want to be or somewhere that's not part of the plan, is you want to be as close to the plan as possible. And the reason that you don't want to go low and turn it into a solo is because eventually you're going to have to break off, and eventually you're going to have to get away from each other, and eventually you're going to have to open canopies. And if you don't know where everybody else is, then you don't know if you're going to open your canopy and run into somebody else. So as long as you stay, even if you're 20 feet low and you're right next to the formation and you're not getting any lower, then when it comes to break off, you're very, very visible to the rest of the people in the formation. And when it comes time to break off, you can break off naturally along with everybody else. So again, that's another important thing about if you start going low, stop, stop bleeding, keep yourself as close to the formation as possible and make sure that you're somewhere visible. Don't track off, 100 feet this way and then do a solo because you're probably going to, encounter somebody that was used to be on a skydive with when it comes time to open. Let's see. And again, for larger ways, if you have any questions about kind of the procedures for if there's a person going low situation or something doesn't go quite to plan, or if a skydive funnels at 6,000 feet or something like that, talk to the organizer beforehand and make sure that there's some sort of a plan in place so that the people know what's going to happen. Break-off and tracking. So choose a break-off altitude, again, that's commensurate with the number of people on your skydive, and break off at that altitude. If you have visual altimeters, you should be jumping with audible altimeters just like when you're free flying. Break off at the altitude. Don't get one more point. It's okay. Nobody cares down there anyway. Just use your break-off altitude to your advantage and get away from each other. So turn and track aggressively. Also, while you're tracking, use that time to make sure you kind of locate what's going on around you. If you're in a formation and you turn and track, one of the things I love to do is as I'm leaving, I look back through my feet at the formation as I'm tracking, and I watch where everybody else is going. So if I'm on a formation where maybe it's a 8-way, 10-way, 12, something like that, you might have a little piece of pie, to work with. And as you trek, you want to make sure that you line yourself up between people. And you want to be able to kind of sweep around a little bit and look to make sure that anybody who might not be in the skydive, if you notice that somebody was not in the formation, you can use that time while you're tracking to try to find them and make sure you can kind of guide your track accordingly to give yourself a little bit extra separation from them. So yeah, you can do that all while tracking. Trust me, it's not too hard. Like I said, you can do this. You can kind of look around like that without moving too much and still maintain a good track. That doesn't mean get done with the skydive, turn around, and start just looking around, and then go. Your camera guy will hate you for that because you just right underneath. Let's see. Oh yeah. So speaking of camera guys, so for the video guy, if you have a belly group and you have a camera guy in the skydive, generally speaking, the camera guy will pull immediately out of the center at breakoff. That means that you really have to track away from the center because that area in the middle that everyone's getting away from becomes the camera guy's. Just because he's pulling high doesn't mean he couldn't have a malfunction. He could have line twist, something like that, and cut away. And if you're also in the center, you now have a person free falling next to a canopy, and that's never good. And also, if you're the camera guy, be where you're supposed to be at breakoff. So if you have the center and you're pulling out of the center and that's the plan, make sure that if you have any kind of issues where you end up on level with the formation, if you screw up, or if you're intentionally going down there to take, kind of fun shots on level with the rest of the formation, get back where you belong, before breakoff. That's kind of your job. You want everybody to be where they were in the plan at breakoff, and that'll let you, get away from each other for getting a canopy over your head without running into somebody. Let's see. I think that's basically all I want to say. The rest of it's kind of covered under canopy flight and that kind of thing. So, Arvin?
Is a barrel roll at full time ever a good idea, and if so, when?
Let's see.
Only on Thursdays.
It's February 29th. No. I personally don't see much of a point to it. I know some people do recommend it. I think it's they're entitled to their opinion. I personally think that I can track and look like this. You can look like this and like this, and basically see everything above you. You can see if there's people that are there and that you might need to track further. The other when you do a barrel roll, can be done. It's very difficult to pull off a barrel roll and not end up dumping a whole bunch of altitude. And then the second thing the question is if you do a barrel roll and you see something, what are you doing with that information? Now what? Oh crap. You know what I mean? Like, if you're the low person in breakoff, it is the responsibility of the person above you to see you, identify you, and start changing their track to get away from you. There's not a whole lot. I mean, like I said, if you're tracking and you're getting kind of low, you get toward the end of your breakoff, you do a barrel roll, you're like, oh, there's a dude. Oh, I guess I just don't pull. I mean, there's no good way to deal with that situation from your point down there. Your best bet is to continue tracking. If you see somebody above you and they look like they're kind of going that way, keep tracking. Just kind of pull yourself over this way a little bit, and deploy at a safe altitude. Don't like I said, don't overreact to somebody being kind of a little bit close out of the corner of your eye. So
That's more specific to belly jumps, so not tracking jumps, right?
Well, is tracking jumps a good time to do a barrel roll at breakoff, or do you have an answer on a tracking jump?
On a 21-way sunset track.
So there's this dive and then there's next dive. I would recommend not going on 21-way tracking dives if there's levels that are going to be way out of whack. So that's another. Tracking is kind of somewhere in between belly flying and free flying. There is the potential for very, very fast closing speeds, just kind of through the normal course of the skydive, much like free flying, where if you think about it, you're all tracking and one person just bellies out. You can hit each other going really fast. So in that way, it's a lot like free flying. On the other hand, the break-off procedure and the body position can be a little bit closer to belly flying. So it's kind of somewhere in between. But again, like I said, big skydives. If you have trouble being right there on a tracking dive with small groups, adding more people generally never leads to more success. So.